Hi everybody, foXnoMad here, and today I want to help you travel smarter by sharing a recent episode of the foXnoMad podcast with you. My guest today is Jen Ruiz. She is a best-selling author who has written about travel hacking and how you can save money on your next flight, what some of the tricks are to buying plane tickets, and we get into all of that on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Jen Ruiz.
Thanks, Jen, for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. Um, I was interested to talk to you because you have a very interesting story of going from being a lawyer a couple of years ago and then traveling the world, as many of us have embarked on this kind of journey. But you've gotten into writing books about all sorts of things, but how other people can do it. I'm curious how that career shift took place. What was the genesis of that?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I definitely did not see this being where I would be at this point in life. You know, when you're going to law school, I think you have this 5-year path, 10-year path, and it starts to feel really rigid and set, right? And what's expected of you and having student loans, things like that. So for me, the impetus for the switch was actually when I was approaching my 30th birthday. And I realized that I had spent pretty much all my 20s working. I worked so hard to get into law school. And then I graduated by 24. And then I worked for a judge. And then I was working at a law firm. And it just felt like during the decade where everybody else was doing fun things and taking road trips and, you know, going to the beach, I was working on goals. And because I was taught that that's kind of how it should be, that there should be this delayed gratification and that you should put in all the work now so that you can reap the benefits later. And I just felt like I wanted to do something for me that was personal and not necessarily professional, because I did feel like I had reached a lot of professional accomplishments, but like my personal life had suffered. Like I didn't really have any of those epic memories. So I set out to take 12 trips in 12 months before my 30th birthday. And that was a challenge that kept me very busy just with figuring out how to afford flights, where to go, you know, what I wanted to see, how to fit it in with my schedule at work, because I was still working at the time. And that was where I fell in love with travel. I realized that when I was traveling, I was more excited about the trip than I was about coming back home, that I really was just looking forward to that. And it was because ultimately, when I was traveling, I had this presence and this ability to be in the moment, and kind of what everybody strives for, right? When everybody talks about a meditation state or the power of now and Eckhart Tolle and all these different things and what we should be as humans. And I don't think I ever really felt that, because I was always thinking so much and I was always working so hard that I never just was in the moment. And travel gave that to me naturally. And I realized that, you know, when I felt just so much more at peace, and I realized like, oh, it's because I'm actually taking time to like smell the new scents and listen to the birds chirping and, you know, taste the really amazing flavors. I'm in the present. I'm not in my head thinking about the future. I'm not worried about the past and things I may or may not have done right or wrong. And so it was just that being. And so it was addictive. And I think for anybody who travels, they'll say the same thing, because it's a way to get yourself out of your daily rut, out of your routine, out of thinking, you know, these are all the problems that I have, and just see the world with such a bigger lens, and your problems just seem small in comparison.
Yeah, and I've spoken with a lawyer in the past on the podcast, and he had a very interesting response to the question I'm going to ask you, which is, being a lawyer is kind of one of those professions that you know, people think is, you know, it's sort of like the evil profession. But to me, a lawyer can also be something that's good, you know, like that helps a lot of people. I don't know what kind of lawyer you were, so I don't know if this is the case, but did you feel like you were leaving something where you were having an impact, or were you dissatisfied with the job that made you kind of leave?
I was pretty squarely on the side of helping people all along. I clerked for a judge in a felony trial court. I worked as a social security disability advocate, trying to help people get benefits. And then I ended up in legal aid, working to help defend people from foreclosure. So I did feel like I was on the right side of the law all along, generally, once I was barred and practicing. But it felt first, at times it did feel futile. Like there was only so much you could do to help people. I do think that I helped people in the time that I was there that I was meant to help, that were meant to come across my desk. And because I was the person that could really defend them in the way that they deserve to be, represented, that I think other attorneys maybe wouldn't have seen that, and they wouldn't have known how to give it the right, like a few people I know I was meant to help. And I know that a lot of attorneys can have the possibility of just turning cases away because they don't want to help people, or they don't want to get stuck down the rabbit hole. And I help people that I know other people wouldn't have helped. So I was meant to be there at that time, and I don't regret it at all. But I think I also just kind of took what I loved about law, which was storytelling, and now I get to do that from a global perspective. And I also help people by sharing and raising awareness of what they do and their livelihoods and kind of what they have to offer. So it's a lot of what I love about the law with a lot of what I don't, which was that feeling of my hands are tied because there's something administrative, or there's something else, or there's something money wise, that no matter what I do, the person's always going to come out on the bottom. I feel now as a travel writer, I have a lot more power to really make a difference and lift people up and explode their lives. If we get, good publicity for them, all of a sudden you can make them a whole other life path. So it's been an interesting transition, and I do feel responsibility in both senses. I feel responsibility to have represented people to the best of my ability, and I feel responsibility now to tell their story in the best way possible to as many people as possible. I feel bad now if a story I write doesn't have the reach that I want it to, or that I feel doesn't have the impact that it should, especially if I know it's a really amazing cause or organization or business or person that I'd like to highlight. So it's interesting. It's two sides of a coin. And I think that as an attorney and having had that responsibility, I can now appreciate that more and appreciate the power of storytelling in telling a narrative.
And it seems like you have the drive. I feel like lawyers have a drive, because to get through the gauntlet to become a lawyer seems like you can't really like slack off, right? Like you have to be pretty organized and focused. So I'm curious, you're a lawyer, you're doing all this work, and then you decide to take these 12 trips. Mm-hmm. Did you know all the 12 places? Did you know all the trips ahead of time, or did you know one or three, or how did you plan that, and where did you go?
Yeah, so the first trip was to Athens, Greece. And when I was there, it was to celebrate my 29th birthday. And I loved it so much that I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if I could keep this feeling going all year long as a way to celebrate the end of a decade, right? As a way to celebrate this momentous milestone birthday. So just have a really big 30th birthday celebration for me. And that's when I had the idea to take a trip every month to extend that feeling. So I didn't have to wait until my 30th birthday to feel like I was still celebrating the end of my 20s, and I was celebrating my youth, and I was making the most of that year. It felt like an amazing race kind of countdown, like the time was running out for me to see as many things as I could and say that I had this great experience in my 20s. So I had that sense of urgency. And I also just felt like it was something that I would figure out as I went along. Sorry, excuse me. And so I was thinking, I knew I wanted to see lavender in the south of France. I knew that was a bucket list experience, that if I could pick anywhere in the world to go, I wanted to do that. And so that was already fixed for July. But other than that, my calendar was pretty flexible, and I was open to filling it in with things as it came up, as I found good deals. JetBlue had a new route that they launched to Aruba. So I was able to find a round trip flight to Aruba for $70. And that's how I ended up in Aruba in March. that wasn't originally on my, radar even. And I had a great time there. So it really depended on where I found flight deals, kind of what was available. I ended up going to Cuba very last minute because I found a $90 deal on Delta, and it was a half-hour flight. So I was like, why not? Let's go for the weekend. And so, yeah, it was a lot of different some impromptus, but also planning consistently throughout in terms of like figuring out how to earn more money, figuring out how to save money on flight, learning about credit cards and travel hacking. So I was doing all of that at the same time.
And where were you flying in and out of? Where was your home base before this?
I was flying in and out of South Florida. And so that was really helpful because South Florida has so many great airports. And I do recommend for people to be flexible in terms of their departure or arrival airports if they're looking for cheap flights, because I was located in Naples and it would have been almost impossible to find cheap flights from Fort Myers, that airport, which was a little bit more obscure. So I would always drive to Fort Lauderdale and Miami, because these were bigger international airports. And from Miami, you can find flights to almost anywhere, right? Same thing from New York, from LAX, from Austin, from Chicago. So there are kind of these hub airports everywhere. And if you could find a way to reach them, you can save a lot of money. And you can have a lookout for flight deals from these major airports. You can get almost anywhere from New York City for like $500 round trip if you wait long enough for a deal. And I mean almost anywhere, except maybe Antarctica. But other than that, like Kenya, New Zealand, like you'll find the deals. So for me, I was very flexible and I was driving to different airports to be able to take off. South Florida was my base and it was a very good base.
Yeah, and there are a couple of misconceptions when it comes to flights. And people ask me this a lot, and I don't know if I have a good answer. I think I have sort of a non-answer, which is, should you book your flights way in advance or way at the last minute? I feel like both can work, but they both have their dangers, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Generally, the sweet spot is about maybe 6 weeks or so in advance for domestic flights, and maybe like 2 to 3 months in advance for international flights. And those are kind of where you'll find the best sweet spot for pricing, because sometimes flights that are too far out can be really expensive. But I think you should book whenever you see a deal. I think that's my number one advice. So don't think like, oh, I'm not going to book it now because it might get cheaper later, or I don't. Like, just don't think about that. If you see a deal, book. And usually you hear a lot of people saying things like, oh, is it cheaper to book a flight on Tuesday, versus something else? Again, at any time you see a deal, just book it. There's really no data to say that there is or isn't a best day to book a deal. That's based on an outdated model where airlines used to post new fares on that day. But now, they're constantly updating new fares. So if you see a fare, book. But there is some data to support that prices tend to be the most reasonable around that 6-week mark for domestic and like 2 to 3 month mark for international flights. So that being said, I would look always for things like flight alerts, which can let you know when there is a deal so that you can book whenever that deal comes up. If you're flexible, 100% you want to go to Italy next summer, I would be signing up for flight alerts so that from now till then, you'll be notified when there is a deal and you can be like, oh, that's a great deal to Italy. I'm going to hop on that and get that. So that's a great way to stay in the know. Also, generally know that budget airlines, especially domestic ones here in the US, Frontier, Spirit, Allegiant, JetBlue, all of them will host sales every couple of weeks to sell unsold seats. So Southwest just finished doing a sale, $59 fare sale, and it's one-way flights that they significantly discount just to sell unsold seats. And you'll be notified of those if you sign up for emails. So there's lots of different ways there that you can find a good deal, regardless of when you're booking.
And I guess now we're sort of jumping into the topics of your books, but I wanted to ask you, when someone's budgeting out a trip, and I not to put words in your mouth, but I'm assuming that you wrote one of the books because a lot of people don't travel as much as they do or they want to because they're worried about the cost.
Absolutely.
So if we look at a trip, like as a pie chart of budgets, you've got your flights, food, accommodation, activities. where can people save the most? Are we looking at flights? Is that where you save the most money? If you really, where you should put your most of your effort?
For me, it is because I think flights are something that are cost prohibitive for a lot of people. And it's a big hurdle in their mind that they have to cross, or the thing, I can never afford to fly there. Similarly, once you have a flight somewhere, you're like, oh, I have to figure the rest of this out. I already have the flight book. So it's a really good kind of hook. And once you save money on the flight, everything else can be figured out. You can get affordable accommodation, affordable food anywhere in the world, because people live all over the world on different price points. So once you get there, you can really figure out how it is that you want to travel based on your budget, based on your price points. If you're in hostels and eating street food, or if you're in, 4-star hotels and eating at, Michelin star restaurants, however it is that you choose to travel. But generally, having that flight there can be the problem. And that applies, again, if you're a budget traveler or a luxury traveler, because let's say that you want to get to Asia, but you don't want to fly there in economy class. And so it's really important for you to be able to find an affordable first class flight for that 17 hours that you're going to be in that seat, because you just won't make it in the middle seat and the last row. So that's when it becomes really helpful for you to save the money on the flight. And that's where it can make a difference between you going on the trip or not. I personally love for flying for free, both first class or coach. If you just want to take a lot of different flights all over the world, travel hacking, which is using points and miles to redeem for free award travel. That's a great way to get to destinations that you might feel are out of reach. The Maldives, New Zealand, all these other places, that Kenya for safari, wherever it is you want to go. It can be difficult to get there on budget airlines. JetBlue doesn't necessarily fly to the Maldives. So you can find affordable flights there and just pay the cost of taxes and fees if you have points and miles. And if you learn how to use your everyday spending on restaurants and gas purchases to maximize those points, and then you use those points to get your free award travel. The same could apply to hotels. I do have friends that have definitely done some bucket list hotels. I have friends that travel hack their honeymoon and they stayed at the overwater bungalows and they got those with points and miles. So it depends on what is your priority. But generally, I feel like if you can knock out a flight, and if you can get a flight reserve, you feel committed to the trip, and you feel like you've knocked out the biggest expense that's preventing you from getting there.
And so you've taken these 12 trips. This year has gone by. You've learned all of this, a lot of the ways to save money on the road. How did the books come about? How do you start writing books? Does that happen as you're traveling, which seems like it would be difficult, or do you do that after the trip? And just to add to that question, are you going back to the office, right? Are you still an attorney, I'm assuming, at this point? So do you go back and work a little bit, or what happened after?
Yes. So I was still working throughout the trips. Afterwards, I had at that point started to really run out of time off and paid leave and things like that. So it became trickier. And so when the year ended, it ended in January, and then I quit in April. So I only stayed a little bit longer. And in February, I wrote my first book. And in March, I published it. And so once I saw even nominal success, I was out of there, because I also had a job teaching English online that I had taken on to help fund my 12 trips in 12 months challenge. So I knew that worst case scenario, I could do that job making $20 an hour while traveling, and I could support myself in a digital nomad capacity. So I had that to fall back on. And I knew I was young. I didn't have, I don't still have any children or animals or things like that. So I had the freedom of movement. And I knew that if I stayed too long, I might be scared to move later. So I figured better to take the leap and figure it out. I have an income stream online. I have that flexibility. The book was something where I wasn't writing it along the way. I wrote it in a weekend in February, but I was promoting it along the way, unbeknownst to me. And I think that's really important, because a lot of people think that writing a book is about writing a book. But really, writing a book is about selling a book. That's why it's called a best-selling book and not a best-written book, because nobody is going to buy your book if they don't know about it. They can't read it. And so it's really useless if you don't market it. And so unbeknownst to me, I was already marketing that book for the entire year that I was doing the challenge. Every time I posted on social media, hey, I'm going to Aruba for $70, people were like, what? That's amazing. So now I was getting traction, and I had essentially spent an entire year priming my audience to get this book. This was the book that they wanted from me. I thought I was going to write more a memoir about the experience, which I'm actually working on now. And I'm very happy to say I have a 5-figure book deal with a publishing company, and it's amazing. But that wasn't the right time to work on that book, because I needed to give people what it is that they most wanted to know from me, which is, how are you getting to all of these places on a budget, for less money? We want to fly for less too. And so by doing that, I had been able to build the book up to a point where it actually became an instant bestseller in 8 categories on Amazon, and it won a Reader's Favorite Book Award. My very first book won a book award, and that was very encouraging for me, to just tell me to keep going, right? This is a proof of concept. It's working. People are using this information. And I think that that's for anybody who wants to write a book. I think keeping those 2 things in mind. First, that if you give people something that they already want from you versus what you're trying to get them to want from you, it's going to be a much easier process. And that it's important to really focus on selling and marketing the book, because it could be the most fabulous book in the world, but if people do not actually read it, it's not going to help anybody.
And how did the nugget start? Like, you said you were promoting it online, but how did people follow you online? Like, how did that start? Did you just, have an Instagram and it grew organically? How did you do that?
I've been blogging since 2014. I've rebranded my website twice, until I landed on Jen on a Jet Plane in 2016. And then I took that challenge in 2017. So at the time, I did have social media, I did have a blog, and I was posting on there, but very much in a small capacity. It was not monetized. I was just trying to grow it. I didn't have any paid brand partnerships or anything like that. That year, actually, one of the trips was to a travel conference where I was able to really see that difference as well. And that was also a big indication for me that I was in the wrong career, because every time I was sent to a law conference, I would want to sleep for as long as possible, get to the session late, sit in the back, really play on the computer, and just hope nobody called on me. And then leave early and go do other stuff around the hotel. Like, I just thought that's what all conferences were. And then I went to a travel conference, and I realized I was trying to see all the sessions, and I was sitting in the front row, and I was taking notes, and I was raising my hand and participating, and I liked it. I was really excited to be there. I enjoyed what I was learning. I enjoyed what I was doing. And that was initially definitely a huge sign that I was just in the wrong profession, because I dreaded legal conferences and legal events, and travel events were so much fun. And so I just knew right off the bat that that was something that I wanted to put more time into and make more into a business. And so it took some time for me to grow, but that conference was a big catalyst in seeing what I could be doing and how it could be a business. It's taken years. That was 2017. It's now 2022. Since I quit my job, after that, it took a year for me to replace that attorney income with online income streams, including teaching English online. Now I'm happy to say that I've since quit teaching English online, and I make more than double what I did as an attorney, with just full income streams from blogging, writing, digital marketing. And it's really great, but it's taken time to get here. It was a process.
And so what's next? I think of the pandemic as this huge block, but also a catalyst, right? So a lot of people before, I feel like it's been a good thing in one sense, in that it's forced companies to realize that remote work is possible, right? Many people have been traveling, digital nomads. They picked that up a long time ago, right? If you work at a computer, 90% of those jobs mean you can do that anywhere as long as you have a computer. And now the pandemic has kind of forced companies to get on board with that. How has that changed, like, your advice to people? And also, how has it changed what you're working on next in your travels? Because we have this huge, just sort of like lost almost 2 years in the middle.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been interesting to see so many of the rigid industries that were so set on never being remote, law being one of them, right? You have to be in the courtroom, you have to be in person. And then all of a sudden the pandemic comes around and everything is online and everything magically switches. So it can be done. You just chose not to do it that way for many years. And I think that that's with anything. So everybody says it can't be done. Everybody says you can't make money blogging, but really it's just that people choose to believe that old mindset instead of choosing to believe that it can be done in a new way. And I think I was reading a book the other day and it said that, like, how sad that you think that only the things that have been done are the things that can be done moving forward. Like, what a limited world you live in versus a world of thinking that so many other things can be done. So I think I was just ahead of the curve in seeing that it was possible. And I don't even think I was one of the originators. There are bloggers older than me, 10 years older than me, that were really ahead of the curve and saw the potential. And now I think everybody sees it and everybody wants to be an influencer and everybody wants to be, just an online media personality, but it's not something that can be done without really having an idea of what it is that you want to do as a business, what your core skill set is, and who it is you want to help. So for me, I know I like writing and storytelling. It was really easy to transition because I already had a background in writing. So when I was pitching to magazines and things like that, I could have my degree to fall back on and people would take me more seriously, even if I didn't have a big portfolio. I could feel confident writing a book and publishing a book on my own because I was a lawyer. So I had backgrounds, I knew how contracts work. I'll figure all this out. And so everything is really learn as you go. And I think that if you're somebody that's considering doing this, it's going to be harder to find remote jobs now that everybody wants one, an actual 9 to 5 job working remotely for a company. So I think don't be afraid to make your own job. We're seeing a lot of the freelancer gig economy, just understanding that there's 2 different personalities required for each, and that to be in a 9 to 5 job, you really have to be somebody that's okay with taking direction, having somebody supervise you and oversee you, and having that limitations in terms of your own autonomy. And that the cons that comes with the freedom of being an entrepreneur is that you have to do everything yourself. You have to motivate yourself. You have to meet the deadlines. Like, you have to push through. And so it's give and take depending on what you like, but how wonderful that we're in an age where you can reach so many people with a click of a button. I think a lot about the old movies and like the salesmen that would go and try to sell vacuums door to door, and how they would have to like physically walk all the time to like maybe sell one vacuum and maybe talk to maybe 100 houses in a day, and how backbreaking that was, and how now we have that impact exponentially, like times 100. You can reach the equivalent of 1,000 doors in the click of a button to potentially sell your vacuum or whatever your product is, and have a much quicker rate. And all you have to do is just sit there. Like, you do not have to walk, you do not have to do anything. And it's so crazy the opportunities we have online now, that I think as the world continues to evolve and see technology reach all of these different areas of the world and everybody become connected so quickly, it's almost impossible not to take advantage of that if you're somebody that knows that you have a gift to share with the world. So I hope, that it's encouraging to people and that they do their own thing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, just the time savings in general can be, a benefit. So companies always look at the bottom line, but it's like, if you cut out a commute, for example, and for most people, a lot of people, an hour total commute, 30 minutes to office, 30 minutes seems pretty standard, and it's probably a lot more for a lot of people, especially in the US. So just that time savings frees up so much. It makes for happier workers. It saves them money because they're not buying lunch out. They're not paying for gas or, public transport, all these things. It's also, randomly, like we saw during the pandemic, car accidents go down. So it's safer, right? So like when you're not outside, not to sound agoraphobic, but when you're not outside, it's a lot safer, right? There's less chance of you tripping and breaking your leg or getting into a car accident or whatever it may be. So there are all these benefits, and hopefully, I should ask you, do you think this is going to continue, or the companies and the world is going to start to fight back on it?
Oh no, I think I do think we're going to see growing pains. As with anything, it takes like kind of 3 to 5 years to adjust. And there's an ebb and flow as people push back and push forward and things adjust and shift. But we've definitely hit a turning point from which there's no coming back, because the whole antiquated 9 to 5 mentality came from a time where you wanted butts and seats, like you have to have this production, like kind of from a factory warehouse mentality. And now we operate much differently. It's not really like task product like churn out oriented. It's more like from any one particular project that you're working on. It's just a much different setting and different goals for your workers. And we're seeing the benefits, the health benefits, right? We're much more health conscious now than when you would have people in a factory just smoking cigarettes back to back and like labeling your packages. I think now we're really trying to be more conscious about having work-life balance, about having people that are happy to be there, about having mental health and having that be a priority. And so we have seen so many cultural shifts now that I think we're going to see work have to evolve along with that. But as with anything, it's going to take time, and there's going to be some growing pains as companies try to figure things out. What kind of, I think anything that's above the curve, these, the WeWork, that's now the Apple TV movie, and they're talking about the remote offices that they're starting everywhere, and all these new products that are adapting to this, and they're going to be the ones that are going to see exponential growth. That's why Amazon saw exponential growth, because it was one of the first to do online marketplaces, and so I think anybody that hops ahead of the curve is going to always see that reward, but we're inevitably going to have the lag of like the majority of people that just want to drag their feet because they don't like change. And companies are definitely going to drag their feet because they like the status quo. But I think it's just going to take some time, but ultimately we will see that hopefully the working atmosphere will be better all around, both for productivity for the company and output, and also for the workers and their lifestyle.
So right now, as we sort of wrap things up, you're working on your memoir, right? Is it done? Are you in draft mode? And are you, what's the progress?
Yes, it's due in August. I am in draft mode. I am poring over every detail, trying to really refine and make sure everything is perfect. So we'll be working on that for a little bit, a couple more months still, working with a coach and an editor and all of that. And then hopefully it'll be released next fall of 2023.
And any trips in between then? And I'll ask that, and then I got one last one that I just have to ask. But yeah.
Yes, many trips, always. Just in the next month alone, I'll be speaking at 3 different travel conferences in Washington State, here in Puerto Rico, and then in Kansas City, Missouri. So interesting places. Always travel conferences are in kind of quote unquote second tier cities because they want to bring tourism to those cities. I'll also be traveling on a trip to Outer Banks, North Carolina, doing some work with the DMO there. So lots of different press trips and things lined up. Hopefully some really exciting trips like to Egypt or Turkey. So that would hopefully be in the fall, maybe Vietnam now that it's reopened. So let's see.
Cool. So I like to ask people who travel or who just in general, what is that? Did you have a time or a moment where you were like, oh my God, like, I can't believe I'm experiencing this, whatever that happens to be? As an example, I've had, probably you've had multiple of these. One of those times I had was something very basic, which was when I went to the Taj Mahal the first time. It was something I had seen on, TV and photos and all that stuff. And when I was standing there looking at it, it was a clear day because normally it's pretty polluted. I've been back a couple of times, but when you see it, I was like, I can't believe I'm seeing this with my own eyes and I'm here right now. It was one of those moments that was very surreal. Do you have a moment or moments like that from your travels just that you'd like to share?
Definitely all of the big wonders, right? So sunrise at Angkor Wat, Machu Picchu, all of those, but those were all kind of crowded. And so that can take away from the magic a little bit. I would say where I really just had like a, wow, this is awesome moment that sticks with me is in the south of France, where I was at Lac de Saint Croix, and it was like a Monday. And it was this beautiful turquoise green water, and everybody's just happy and frolicking. And it's in the middle of a pristine canyon, and all you hear is birds, and it's just so picture perfect, like nothing's wrong with the world right now. And I just couldn't believe that I had the luck to be there on a Monday afternoon where everybody else is at work, struggling and fighting with somebody on the phone, sending an angry email, asking who ate their lunch from the fridge. And I'm here in the middle of like bliss and just on a paddle boat, just relaxing and enjoying and taking it in. That was the first time I really felt relaxed, just really so sublime and just so at peace. And all the other places were amazing, but also high adrenaline. Like you want to get the pictures of Angkor Wat with all the people there, like, competing around them. And you want to get like Machu Picchu, like the perfect view and all that. And you're climbing. And so it can feel like you're working for it a little bit. You're kind of sometimes running to beat the crowds, but this just felt like there's no working for anything. This is what heaven looks like. And there's no rush here. Just enjoy. Would you like a snack to go with your paddle boat? Like just like so many, it was just so perfect. And it was just such a happy, relaxed day that was in sharp contrast to the hustle and bustle I'm always doing. So it's something that sticks with me as a moment that I try to go to internally when I just need to feel a sense of inner calm.
Oh, that's really nice. I love the response I get when I ask people that question, because it feels universal that you do have those moments, and those moments stay with you forever, and can kind of change your life, like change your career, change kind of what you're doing. Thank you very much, Jen, for being on the podcast. If you could let everybody know where they can find you, what you're working on, all the usuals, which I don't have to tell you about.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Anil. You can find me at jenonajetplane.com. I'm on Amazon. My books are under Jen Ruiz, and under social media, the same handle at JenOnAJetPlane.
Thanks very much for watching this episode of the foXnoMad podcast. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. I'll have new videos for you every week, and I'll see you in the next video.